see everybody. Excited to be here and get to work. We've got a number of new players on this team, which really provides us an opportunity to grow. It's going to take some time for us to integrate everybody. That also can be an exciting process. Someone told me, I remember talking about being young a lot last year. We're the third youngest team in the league. I think Charlotte and Brooklyn are younger than us, and to me that really speaks to the same opportunity that we have, with our new players. So that can be something that I think from the beginning that we embrace, and it gets back to working hard, and we can be patient and still be urgent. Hey, Lauren.
I don't know. Oh, there we go. Other than the opportunity to grow, what do you like exactly about this roster construction with how you have so much depth at the five and in the front court?
Yeah, I think we'll find out more and more about our team as we start to practice and play. Speaking specifically to some of our new guys, I think Nikhil gives us another player that's capable of really defending at the point of attack, which I think is really important. Kristaps' versatility defensively, and Luke as well. I think, you think of Luke, because he shoots the ball so well, he's more than a shooter, as they like to say. So describing some of those individual characteristics, I think all those guys love to play. You throw Ace in that bucket too. It's been fun to see his growth in a short period of time and his enthusiasm and passion. And I think, our whole group, what it does excite me is I think we've got guys that, are passionate and enthusiastic about doing the work. And that's really, what it's going to take for us to get where we want to go. Overarching with the roster, I think there's a versatility. That's something Ansi and I have talked about, and him and himself and his group have been able to achieve that, in a way that we haven't had that before. So that versatility, the balance, I think is also, something that is significant for us. Those different qualities, and I like to think that I think the players that we have are excited about the group as a whole, the guys that are coming back and the people we're adding. And every year, every season, you turn a page. And I think for our group, tomorrow being kind of the start of a new race, a new lifetime, and really embracing that.
Coach, speaking more to the personnel. Yeah, right.
I know. Tricky. This is too easy. We really have to use all this?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Speaking more to your personnel, in this league, perimeter defense is so imperative because you have so many great perimeter scorers. So when you look at guys like Nikhil, who's a new addition, and you pairing him with Dyson, how excited are you about possibly forming one of the more ferocious perimeter defensive units in the league, especially with those two having them on the floor together at times?
Yeah, everything you said is true, and and not to diminish my enthusiasm about having those guys, I think, but it's still five guys on the court, and the best defense is everybody's defending, and they're collectively helping one another. Anytime you improve, whether it's Kristaps' ability to protect the rim in a way, as you mentioned, you said it better than I could with Nikhil and Dyson. I'm excited about that. I think what happens is, like anything, players that are really good at something have the ability to raise everybody's level. And that's the way that we need to approach having those skill sets, where it's not, hey, you just stop your guy. It's still about the Hawks, getting stops. And to expand on that a little bit, our ability to make plays, to create havoc, is tremendously important for us on the other end of the floor. And that's, I think, our style of play. Any team's style of play should reflect their strengths and give you an opportunity to maximize your personnel. So part of maximizing, Nikhil and Dyson, other guys, being able to make plays and, take a one-on-one matchup is us, having an opportunity to make a team pay at the other end. And that goes to pace. It's little things. We didn't do a great job of converting last year, and we need to be better at that. That wasn't pretty all the time, whether it was errant passes or poor spacing. And I think over time that's something that you improve on, and it's important for us to improve on it. We'll circle it all the way back to, you don't have as many opportunities to do that if you don't have those guys, those on-ball defenders.
Hey, good morning, Coach.
Good morning.
We've seen Trey grow tremendously as a leader and both on the defensive side of the ball, like working with you and during your tenure, as the Hawks head coach. As you go into camp, do you have any challenges or any expectations that you'll set for Trey as the season gets ready to begin?
We had a chance, just Trey and I, to sit down last week, and I want to set the bar for him high. It's interesting when you have a player that has achieved as much as he has at a young age. I think at times you're looking for ways to get better, and you mentioned a few of them. I think the key word for Trey is efficiency, and for him to be efficient and for that to be the primary focus, whatever that looks like. If that looks like more of this or less of this, or however that game evolves, I think what you're going to see is Trey having to feel the game in a way to find the areas in a given game where he can contribute and be most efficient. So there's games that's going to mean scoring more. There's games when he's going to be passing more. I think the constants are going to be him forcing pace and not just pushing the ball off the dribble, but passing ahead. He was one of the very best in the league, if not the best, on passing ahead. So we've talked about doing that even more, different type of passes ahead, and that's something, he enjoys doing. And so helping us with our pace is a huge thing that comes every night. And again, it might be differently, how he does that. And then the other thing that he's got to do every night is be efficient defensively. People attack him, and, because they know it has an impact on him offensively. They try to fatigue him, and when you have a player that is as good on the ball as Dyson's been, they try to put Trey on the ball. It's like basic logic. So Trey understanding that, and taking pride in what his job is on the defensive end, again, that leads to team efficiency defensively. And, one of the things we did talk about, was me challenging him. And, that happens in a lot of different ways. That's not always going to be, sitting up here or in a team format. It could be in film. It could be in the locker room. It could be, face-to-face, before or after, whenever the case may be. But, he wants to get better every year. I think having some other players that really can mesh with him, his ability to help pull that group together, that's going to involve, I think, the word that I like to use with Trey all the time is evolution. And to me, his leadership is about him being efficient and doing the things on the court that help our team win. You prepare off the court for those moments, but I think his efficiency on the court and him embracing that raises everybody's level. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Coach in the back. You guys had acquired Luke Kennard here in the offseason. I think a lot of folks around the league probably think he is purely a shooter because of his high shooting percentage from beyond the arc, but a role he took on in Memphis was becoming more of an offense initiator and a ball handler. I'm just wondering how much you envision him being kind of a ball handler and offense initiator apart from Trey, and maybe less of just a spot-up shooter like many people probably still think he is.
Yeah, I guess I see him as much more than that. The only thing that I've mentioned to him, and some of it is half joking, but I think he got the message, is I just want him to make sure he's taking them. I think the volume for him, and he'll get more of that I think those opportunities, whether they can come in transition, in pick and roll, off the ball, on the ball, because when you're that good at something and you're unique, you force the defense to adjust to you. And I think that's when a lot of his playmaking comes. And, I don't know how many of you guys know, I've known for a little while, he was a quarterback in high school. And I think he's, you find players that can make reads, and I wasn't like 8th grade. I'm not sure that counts. But he has the ability to see the entire floor, and similar to what I was talking about with Trey and other guys as well. When you have the ball, those are opportunities to create efficiency for yourself and other people. And it hasn't occurred to me at any point that he is just a shooter, and I think that's something I think our guys are going to find they like playing with him. Yes.
Coach, when you look at your roster, I know your depth's kind of only on paper right now until y'all get out there, but can you compare what you see on your depth chart to what you've had in your other seasons as a head coach in the NBA?
I've been doing this a little while, and I think the one thing that's consistent is that there's, every year there's change. And I think in this case, it kind of feeds in itself. It's a little bit of a circular kind of analysis, and that I think the versatility that we have is unique. That may be, if I were to think back about some of the teams I've had, both here or previously, feel like we've got a lot of versatility. We have some multiple position players. We have a lot of combinations. Onyeka and Kristaps, I think, can be really good together. You look at Nikhil and Dyson together. Like, you start building out those, potential combinations. I think Trey is clearly, we're not going to be playing Trey at power forward, so to speak, in a matchup situation. So, but his versatility is defined differently. It's a versatility of how he plays. So that's the first thing. And, honestly, his group did a terrific job of understanding that this summer and bringing players in that have the ability to mesh like that. I think the other thing is balance. We've got some balance across our roster, and when I say balance, depth as well. Some of our younger guys that actually had opportunities last year because of all the injuries, had a chance to get better. And where those players fit into a rotation, we haven't started practicing yet. I think the biggest challenge with that is, the balance between having continuity and having change, on a game-to-game basis. For our team to be as good as I think we need to be and want to be, our players have to understand that every game is different, not just from the standpoint that minutes might fluctuate or rotations are different, but every game is potentially going to require something different of different players. But we do have the ability and have the versatility, I think, whether it be matchups or style, to play a few different ways. And we've got a group that, because there are so many new guys that create new combinations, I think I mentioned earlier, I think I said that we have to be patient, understand this is a slow burn. But that doesn't mean we can't be urgent about, focusing and pursuing that.
Coach,
Yeah.
go ahead. Coach, the injury to Jalen Johnson last year was a big blow for this team. With Jalen returning and that newfound versatility, where do you see this team getting to possibly this season?
I think projections like that are never something that is my focus. We always have high expectations for ourselves. I think we never would want to set a ceiling on our team, but equally in order to achieve those things, that can't be your focus. Our focus has to be on every day, trying to improve, and bringing that mentality, that humility, that energy, that commitment, and that's really what propels that growth and helps you maximize who you are as a group. You mentioned Jalen. I think Jalen may be as excited as anybody, to get going. He's worked unbelievably hard to come back from some injury situations that I know were frustrating for him because he loves to play. But I also think he's another guy that, we have to be patient with. Jalen's, young is a relative concept, on our team. But I would throw Jalen in the young bucket. And I think he understands that. But you can still be good when you're young, and he's that. I think like some of our other guys, the key for Jalen is to be efficient. And because of his versatility, he can impact the game a lot of ways. He's an elite defensive rebounder. So when he grabs it off the rim and pushes it and either attacks the rim or passes it, it's pretty hard to guard. But I want him to do more than that. He wants to do more than that. His teammates want him to do more than that. We have a lot of guys that can do more, but we have to be focused on doing more collectively. And how everybody can't, quote unquote, do more all at once. We have to read the game, and that's where our efficiency comes from. But similar to our team, you always want more. But that can't be your focus, whether it be your individual production or anything external. We need to keep our focus where, by placing it in the place that gives us the greatest probability for success.
Quinn, when you say that that you want this team to be patient yet urgent, do you mean that in the macro sense or the micro sense or both? And what I mean, macro sense as an entire franchise team, micro sense as far as just individual players and that sort of thing.
That's a good point. I would say both. I think they go hand in hand. I don't know how many players are still on our roster from 2 years ago when I started, maybe 3. And we've got the 3rd youngest team in the league. So it kind of speaks to it. I don't know how you can conclude anything else than macro patience from that. You have a new group who happens to be the 3rd youngest team in the league. So reconciling that with, wanting to be really good today, I think you can be both. I think longer term success, is a process. Very seldom do you see a team go from here to here. Usually there's steps along the way because, having success is an experience in itself. A lot of it is about adjusting to failure and adjusting to adversity and allowing that to propel you. So if that's where we're headed and where we want to be, and I think it is, the way that we get there is to not necessarily, project out with a 5-year plan. That can happen, but right now, we're talking about this year, and we're talking about this week, and we're talking about today. And if we approach it that way, I think over a period of time, that seems like a long time from now. And, the NBA sometimes is, they say dog years, right? Every year it seems like a long time. And so for us to maximize that, I think our focus being in the present is the way that we can actually, ironically, connect with the future. But I think it's a great question, and to reiterate, I do think it's both for all the reasons that I gave you.
Coach, obviously you haven't had a practice yet, but you added a high caliber big in Chris Stapps. You already had 2 of them in Jalen and Onyeka. In the right situations, do you feel like you could roll with any combination of 2 of those 3 as your bigs?
I do. I think this is a little bit, goes to something I believe about coaching. And, it's about maximizing a roster. And to do that, there has to be growth from those individual players. Those combinations may look different as far as how they perform on the court. But absolutely, that's where I see this. Those guys having enough. I think you saw progression and growth, particularly here, from Jalen, even though it was a shortened season. You saw it at the end of the year with Onyeka. We've seen Kristaps in multiple roles in his time in the league. And so those guys being able to play in combination, can be a strength of our team. It's also something that they haven't done yet. So it's really in a microcosm, as we were spending time on the previous questions, I think that, having that potential there and, moving it forward with reps and experience, and then being able to adjust at various times, when we need to, and our players having the understanding, to help each other with a lot of those adjustments, because that's what versatility requires. Versatility is by definition is change, and balance is change. So the key things for us, and with whatever lineup, there's some consistent constants that need to be our identity. No matter who's on the floor, if it's Kristaps and O, if it's Jalen and Kristaps, if it's O and Jalen, and those guys aren't playing 2-on-2 against the other team either, right? So that's what it means for a team to get better, improve, and find an identity. And that's where we are. If you haven't played together and you're young, you just think all of us, right? Like life is about that process. And sometimes, as I've said before, it's pretty much a given. I think we all know that, that this league is hard and there's adversity, whether it comes from injury or good night, bad night, fatigue, and how we deal with that collectively, is key to us continuing to progress the way we want to.
Coach, right? So it was a short time, but you coached Nickeil Alexander-Walker for 15 games in Utah. What are you most looking forward to with the opportunity to coach him again?
Yeah, it's interesting, keeping the theme of dog years, 15 games, about a quarter of a season. You can do the fractional math with 7 years per one season. That's still a pretty healthy amount of time that I was with him, and with him enough to really get to know him. Since the time that I coached him, when I say get to know him personally, he's really evolved as a player. And I think, that evolution for guys, it's easy to feel like, at a given time, it's a short race. It's not a short race, I should say. It's a marathon. And having a job is different than having a career. And Keel's evolving as a player, and you can see him, continue to grow. The constant that I think he can provide us day to day is that consistency, that professionalism, that leadership, because he's been through a lot of that. He's had tough times where he's had to battle through stuff. He's had incredible success, individually and with the team. He's a better shooter than he was when he's a better passer, he's a better defender. So, continuing to do those things and doing them in a new environment, and as much as anything, his spirit, I think, is the thing that he can give this team that's really unique. And, that's a heck of a statement about a guy. And I think it's reflective of, of who he is and his journey. And I think his willingness to share that.
Coach, we all just finished watching this Pacers run of last year. That's pretty incredible. And you already talked about the pace that you want to incorporate with your team, but is there anything else from that style of play, whether it be, higher defensive pickup points, playing deeper into your rotation, that you can take from that team and apply it to your own?
Well, I think we were third in pace last year. I think we led the league in passes ahead. We didn't convert as many. I think Indiana really took a step when you saw their defense take a step. And a lot of respect for Rick. He's a friend. We've been, continuing to work on playing random basketball, for lack of a better word, read-based basketball. I think that's what we do. Our roster is beginning to formulate in a way where I think we're more capable of doing that. It goes to both as a coach, kind of how you feel, your team should have the most success playing a certain way. That's been an evolution for a lot of our guys, for Trey in particular. He's playing more pick and roll with smalls. He's playing with more pace. There's less straight pick and roll with 5. There's more cutting. That kind of fits who we are, but that's a reflection of the game changing, so and a lot of those things are consistent. I think being able to be disruptive defensively fits with that. So you want to be who you are, but who you can be. That sounds too philosophical, but some of those habits, continuity helps that. And if you look at all the numbers, that's what it says. In terms of, we were last in the league in isolation. I don't think that's always the most effective way for our team to play. We have a balanced group, and for us to connect collectively and be comfortable with the final score and not the box score, is the key. And no matter how unselfish you may be individually, that's still a hard thing. They're not posting offensive efficiency in the box score. You don't pull that up online. You pull up somebody's bottom line numbers. So that's on you guys to capture that part of the game. And that's the key for us. That's where our progression lies. It's in being efficient with what we do and becoming better and better at it, and being better and better. We want the whole to be greater than the sum of the parts, and that requires a lot of commitment and a lot of sacrifice, and what is a league and a world of individual achievement. But when you see it in the end, if you can hang on to it, winning feels a lot better to everybody, and it's something you get to share, but it's hard. And I don't think we should run from the fact that it's hard. And it's a journey as well.
Coach, good morning.
These mess me up, man.
Right.
There you go. All right. I got all these different people because every microphone is a person. Right?
Right.
Okay.
Right. Good morning.
Morning.
Talk about championship experience. For some reason, players with championship experience have been rare on this roster through the years.
Yeah.
You have that now. Talk about the value of that, not just on the floor, but in the locker room and on the bench.
It's a great point. And for us, let's do this. Let's talk about 50-win experience, because that's more relevant. You got to get to that point that says you're in the conversation. To win a championship, you got to knock on the door consistently, and then you got to get the right breaks. You got to stay healthy. You got to get the right matchups. You got to shoot the ball well, like all those things. But I think the challenge is to be in the conversation. And for me, that regular season success, having some guys that have experienced, we don't have a lot of them. Like when we talk about like what we got to do and what we want, that's great. But how we get there, is by doing this and getting better. And I love that we've got a few guys, Nikhil the last couple of years being in the Western Conference Finals, Kristaps, as the Eastern Conference Finals, and then knocking the door down, and winning a championship. We've got a lot of hungry guys that want to taste that want to feel that. And part of it for us is understanding, what we have to do to get there, and focus on internal stuff, not external things, because those things in the end, are not what, at the end of the year, you want to have the substantive, tangible result of that work.
Coach, over here, Coach.
Yeah.
Speaking of Kristaps, a guy you had a lot of success with was Rudy in Utah, and he was a great defensive presence, a great defensive impactor. Kristaps is not quite the same player as Rudy, but he's a similar size.
Not quite the same player?
Well, he's different.
What do they have in common? They're both 7'2",
well, to that point, that's what I mean. Yeah,
I understand.
Do you envision
Rim protection?
Exactly.
Okay.
Do you think Kristaps can have a similar or the same sort of impact that Rudy had defensively on your teams in Utah?
It's a good question. And it's a big picture question. And this is something that I think that is good for everybody to kind of understand. This game is so different today than it was 5 years ago. The impact that a big could have on the rim, the straight logic is keep him as close to the rim as you can. So what Kristaps can do with a matchup situation is make someone have to guard him out on the floor. That forces a cross match. There's all kinds of things that are going on there where defensively you try to utilize your players the best way you can. Not to dwell in the past, but that's what Rudy did. In Kristaps' case, he's going to do more in different ways. It's probably not that it's hard to do that. It's hard for rim protectors across this league right now to have the same impact. That it's still real, no question about it. No question about it. But for us to protect the paint as a team, and then have that back line. I think just having that back line isn't enough. And then, the versatility offensively, I think also is something that Kristaps is capable of creating. When I say versatility, being able to stretch the defense and shoot the ball, be able to, post up or isolate in a situation where he can get his own shot. That's something we haven't had as much of. Or at least haven't been as efficient as we want to be with it. So I understand the question on the rim protection, and I agree. But I think the overarching situation is how different this game is. Trey will probably be put in more pick and roll, guarding the screener. I know if you look at where it was 5 years ago, versus where it is today, and it's not just a playoff situation. It's every night. It's every quarter. And he's aware of that. That's where he's digging in and saying, hey, this is the way that I can impact the game defensively. This is where I'm going to raise my level. While at the same time having his coach tell him, you got to push the ball up the court every time. So Rudy didn't have to do that. And Trey's not a rim protector. Yeah, that's true too.
Hey, Coach, over here. So, when you came here, you wanted to establish a culture and identity, just, as you become the head guy. You've mentioned that you've had a lot of roster turnover. You guys are the third youngest team in the league. How do you feel that has came along during your tenure here? And then do you feel like the guys, especially this year that you added, are they enhancing that, kind of pushing it forward, or do you feel like it's like we have to kind of get them also adjusted to it with the guys who've been in the program for a while?
Yeah, well, I think change, is the constant in many respects. You don't. We haven't had change for the sake of change. You're just trying to get better, and there's different opportunities and different things that come along at different times. Continuity gives you an opportunity to get better because you're building. I think we've had to do both. We're trying to improve Onsi, his group. We're all trying to improve the team. Part of that improvement is continuing to maximize individual players' improvement. You take a guy like Veet, you take a guy like Keaton Wallace, Mo Gay, those guys working to get better. And then you have external change with someone like Kristaps, So that's really an evolution. It's an understanding that ultimately you're trying to improve. While that's going on, you'd like to find some constants that you believe in organizationally. When we talk about culture, like that word can have, I think that's the interesting thing about that. There's a lot of cultures, and oftentimes your culture is more about what you do than it is what you say. And, when what you say, you can say about what you're doing. Kind of going tongue twister here. But my point is, if we can be about hard work and unselfishness, let's just take those two things. I think that in and of itself, establishes a culture without talking about culture, consistently, or without talking about those qualities, of course. And we want guys, to embrace that collectively. I think that's how you have sustained success over time. And that unselfishness is, paramount to success, both short and long term. So we'll keep grinding on it. And that's probably the best word that I can throw at you, is just to grind, bring it every day. Okay? All right.